Hi guys, welcome to Scholars. Myself Biswajit Sir, your faculty for geography. So in the last class, we talked about the interiors of the Earth, where we talked about the outer core and the inner core. So today we are going to talk about a phenomena called as geomagnetism and see how it's related to your outer core. Okay, so in today's class, the first thing that we are going to talk about is the reasons for geomagnetism. Okay, the first thing is reason for geomagnetism, or why the earth is having a magnetic field. So in this topic we'll talk about a very important theory, and the name of the theory is your dynamo theory, which talks about the reasons behind earth's geomagnetism. Fine. After that we'll go on to understand the differences between your magnetic poles and geomagnetic poles. Then we'll understand the differences between your magnetic declination and inclination, or what is magnetic declination and magnetic inclination. Then we'll talk about geomagnetic reversals, and then finally conclude by understanding what magnetosphere is, right? So today's first topic of discussion is the reasons for geomagnetism. Okay, so in this topic we are going to talk about a very important theory, and the name of the theory is your dynamo theory. Now let us look at what is this dynamo theory talking about. Now this dynamo theory, it proposes a mechanism by which a celestial body like Earth or any star will generate a magnetic field and sustain it over an astronomical time scale. Fine. So what is this theory suggesting? This theory suggests that because of convection in the outer core combined with the Coriolis effect will give rise to a self-sustaining earth magnetic field. So the earth's magnetic field is because of two reasons: because of convection in the outer core, and secondly because of Coriolis effect. Now we'll understand what is these two terminologies, what is convection and what is Coriolis effect. Fine. Okay, let's look into the mechanism. What is the first point? It states that the earth magnetic field is generated in the earth's outer core. Now the differences in the temperature, pressure and composition within the outer core causes a convection current in the molten iron of the outer core. A cool and denser material will sink, while warm and less dense material will rise. So this paragraph is talking about your convection, or this point is talking about convection. Now what is this convection? This point states that in the outer core, I'll draw two cores. This is the outer core and this is the inner core, right? So in the outer core, the dynamo theory states that because of temperature, pressure and composition differences, there occurs convectional currents. So what happens in this area? In this area, materials which are hotter and having less dense will move up, because less dense means what? It will move up, right? For example, if you look into the mantle convection cell, why was magma flowing from the lower layers towards the crust? Because the magma was hot. Higher temperature means less density, and less density means that it will try to move up, right? So the materials which are hotter and less denser will move up from the lower layers of the outer core to the upper layers of the outer core, and materials which are hot will what happen? And the materials which are less hot and having higher density will sink and move to the lower layers of the outer core, right? So materials which are warmer and less denser will move up from the lower layers of the outer core to the upper layers, and materials which are less temperature or having less temperature and having higher density will move down. So this results in what? This results in formation of convection cells in the outer core. Understood this part? Very simple. So this is the convection. So what is happening? Because of this convection, or because of this flow of liquid iron, convection of which material is taking place? Convection of iron is taking place. Fine. So this flow of liquid iron in form of convection cells, it will generate electric currents. Understood? This flow will result in generation of electric currents, because iron will have what? Iron will have ions, right? So this flow of iron will result in formation of electric currents, which in turn will produce a magnetic field. Understood this? So where is this magnetic field generating? This magnetic field is generating in the outer core. Understood this point? Fine. Let's look into the next point. So we have established how the magnetic field emerges or originates, right? So the charged metals which are passing through these fields go on to create electric current of their own, and so this cycle continues. This self-sustaining loop is known as geodynamo. So what is geodynamo? Let me explain. So what did we establish in the last slide? That in the outer core, in the outer core, because of convection, what is happening? Because of convection, magnetic field is generating, right? So what will happen to this magnetic field? This is the outer core. So this magnetic field, because of the convection cells, what will happen? It will move to the adjacent areas, right? So in the adjacent area, what is the adjacent area to the outer core? Adjacent area to the outer core is your lower mantle, right? So what will happen in the lower mantle? So all the metals which are found here, all the charged metals, see, all the charged metals passing through this field. So the magnetic field which is developing in the outer core, once it reaches the mantle, what will happen to the charged metals? These charged metals will come in contact with the magnetic field originating in the outer core, and this metal in turn will produce an electric field or an electric current, and this electric current will in turn produce a magnetic field. So this magnetic field is moving from, or it is spreading, not moving, rather it is spreading from the outer core to the mantle. Which mantle? The lower mantle. So what will happen in the lower mantle now? In the lower mantle, the charged metals are coming in contact with the magnetic field which is originating in the outer mantle, right? So in this part, what will happen? In this lower mantle, these charged particles will in turn produce an electric field, and this electric field will in turn produce a magnetic field. So this magnetic field will now go from the lower mantle to the upper mantle, right? It will go to this layer, that is your upper mantle here, right? So in the upper mantle, again what will happen? The metals which are present in the upper mantle, it will come in contact with the magnetic field from the lower mantle. Now again it will produce an electric field in the upper mantle, which in turn will produce a magnetic field. Understood this part? So as a result of this, what can we say? A magnetic field is being produced in the whole earth, originating in the outer core, as it is spreading from the outer core to lower mantle to upper mantle to the crust, right? But what is the direction? So what we have established till now, we have established that the magnetic field is present, right? This magnetic field originates where? It originates in your outer core, and then it is spreading. It is spreading where? It is spreading across the earth. Across earth we find the presence of this magnetic field. Understood? This is what we have established till now. Next point, the spiral movement. Look at this diagram. What is this diagram showing? This diagram, if you look at this lines here, what are these lines? What is this spiraling lines? These lines are nothing but the magnetic field lines. Understood this? Fine. So till now what we have established? We have established that the earth is having a magnetic field. But what is the direction of the magnetic field? Suppose this is the earth. So when studies were done, it was found that the magnetic fields were in the shape of donuts, like this. Okay. So it originates in the outer core and it spreads not only across the earth, but look at this diagram here. This is the surface of the earth. From the surface of the earth, it is also moving towards the atmosphere, right? So what can we say? We can say that from the outer core, this magnetic field will extend up to the atmosphere, and as a fact I will state that it extends up to a height of 60,000 kilometer from the surface of the earth. So earth's magnetic field is found till a height of 60,000 kilometer from the surface of the earth. Understood this? Now if you look into the direction of flow of the magnetic field, it is in the shape of spirals, right? It is in this shape of spirals. Now why do we have this kind of shape, or why do we have a spiraling movement? This point is very, very important, and this is where a Coriolis effect comes into the picture. The spiral movement of the charged particles caused by the Coriolis force means that the separate magnetic fields created are roughly aligned in the same direction. Meaning what? The meaning that the magnetic field which was developed in the outer core because of Coriolis effect will have a movement in this direction. Again, once the magnetic field developing in the outer core is having this kind of direction, once it reaches the mantle, here too because of Coriolis effect, it will have a spiraling movement like this. So all these spiraling movement are aligning in the same direction, or all these directions of the magnetic field are aligning together, and overall we get a structure like a spiral movement. Understood this part? So first thing, what did we establish? First thing, we established that earth is having a magnetic field originating in the outer core, right? And second thing, what did we establish? We established that the earth or the direction of the magnetic field is in the form of a spiral movement. And why are we getting this spiraling movement? It is because of your Coriolis effect. Coriolis effects. Coriolis effect is very simple to understand. We'll deal with Coriolis effect more extensively when we talk about the atmosphere and the wind system. What is Coriolis force? Coriolis effect is nothing but it's a force that acts on a body which is having a rotatory motion. Understood this? Fine. Okay, so we have established the magnetic field as well as the direction of the magnetic field or the movement of the magnetic field, right? Fine. So the next thing that we'll talk about is your magnetic poles. Now, in your introduction, the first thing that or in the first slide, what did I say? That we'll talk about two different concepts. One is called as your magnetic poles and another one is called as a geomagnetic poles. So on Earth, we have three different poles. One is the geographic poles, one we have the magnetic poles, and one we have the geomagnetic poles. Now let us look into each one of them individually. So the first thing that we look into is the magnetic poles. What are magnetic poles? The most common understanding of magnetic poles is that they are the positions on the Earth's surface where the geomagnetic field is vertical. Meaning what? Look at this diagram here. So we established that the magnetic field is having a spiraling movement, right? Now this is suppose for an example magnetic north pole, magnetic pole. So in this area what is happening? In this area, let me draw the upper surface of the Earth. So as the magnetic field is spiraling and it is moving towards the north magnetic field. See, this is the direction, right? So in this area what is happening? So the area where this magnetic field, when it reaches the surface of the Earth, this horizon that you see here, this horizontal line or this tangent that you see here, if this magnetic field which is moving towards the polar areas and it is meeting the surface of the Earth, right? So the point where this magnetic field line is perpendicular to this horizontal line drawn at the surface of the Earth, that will become your magnetic pole. Understood this part? Now look at this diagram. In this diagram, we are having magnetic pole lines like magnetic field lines like this, right? So in this area where the magnetic field line is 90 degree and in this area where the magnetic field line is 90 degree to the horizontal which is drawn from the surface of the Earth, these areas are called as your magnetic poles. Understood this? Now what is geographic poles? Geographic poles, now very simple to understand. Geographic poles are nothing but the North Pole and the South Pole, which is at 90 degree latitude north as well as 90 degree latitude south. Understood? Now always remember, geographic pole is different from magnetic pole. Geographic poles are those locations where the longitudes meet, right? Where the longitudes are meeting. Understood? Now what are magnetic poles? Magnetic poles are those areas where the Earth's surface or the horizontal to the Earth's surface and the magnetic field line is 90 degree to each other. Understood this portion? Fine. Okay. So these poles are also called as deep poles. So magnetic poles are also called as your deep poles. The magnetic poles are usually fairly close to the geographic poles. See, geographic poles and magnetic poles are two different poles and they do not converge. So if at 90 degree latitude north and south we have the geographic poles, it will be somewhere else, but very close to the geographic poles we have magnetic poles, that is magnetic north and magnetic south. Understood this point? Okay. So geographic poles and magnetic poles are not the same. We'll look into a diagram which then you'll get a more clearer picture. Fine. So we have established that we have a geographic pole, that is North Pole and South Pole. Then we have magnetic pole, which is South Pole and North Pole, right? Now there is another type of poles which is called as your geomagnetic poles. So we have talked about geographic pole, magnetic pole, and now we'll talk about the geomagnetic poles. So what are these geomagnetic poles? So geomagnetic poles are the intersections of the Earth's surface and the axis of a bar magnet hypothetically placed at the center of the Earth. Meaning what? Now I have to give you an example of compass. Now if the compass is freely suspended in the air, in which direction will it point? Now the compass is always pointing towards the northern direction or towards the north pole. Okay, the compass will always direct towards the north pole. Understood this? Okay, this is the first thing that you keep in mind. First thing, what did I say? The compass, when it is freely suspended, always points to the north. Second thing, I'll state that. Now what is this needle? Now compass is a needle, right? So this needle is nothing but what? It is a magnet. The needle itself which is present inside the compass is a magnet, right? Now if you look into the properties of the magnet, what will happen? Magnets have south and north pole, right? So in this case, what will happen? North pole are close to each other, meaning what? According to your magnetic properties, these two magnetic bars will repel, right? Because similar poles repel, right? Now if there are two bar magnets in this direction, here we have north, here we have south, here we have north, and here we have south. So south pole and north pole are there, right? Because of this, what will happen? Will we have repelling here or will we have attraction? In this case, we will have attraction. Understood this point, right? So first thing, keep in mind, I talked about a compass. Now compass, when it is freely suspended, it always points towards the north, and the needle. Now what is pointing towards the north? The needle which is present inside the compass is pointing towards the north, right? And this needle is a magnet or not? Yes, it is. Second thing, I said that according to magnetic properties, if two bar magnets are kept in place together or very close to each other, and if north pole of one and the north pole of other is close together, it will repel. But if the south pole and north pole are kept apart from each other or close to each other, south here and north here, it will attract, right? So what did I say here? I said here that the needle is pointing towards the northern direction, right? This needle which is present inside the compass is pointing towards your north, meaning what? Meaning inside the earth there is a hypothetical bar, magnetic bar, with south pole in this direction and north pole in this direction, right? Because if you look into this needle, north will be here, right? This is the north, this is the south. So only if there is a presence of a bar magnet inside the earth having a polarity where? Having the south pole in the geographic north and the north pole in the geographic south, we will have, this is the reason why the compass is pointing towards the north. The compass is pointing towards the north because here there is a south magnetic pole which is called as a geomagnetic pole, and here we will have a north pole. Understood this part? So if you look into this diagram here, this is mentioning a geomagnetic north pole, meaning what? Meaning here we will have presence of a bar magnet, right? We will have a presence of a bar magnet. Now compass is always pointing towards your north, right? So here we will have a bar magnet inside the earth, which is a hypothetical in nature, meaning in reality we do not have a bar magnet. We can say that the compass, since it is pointing towards the north, meaning what? Meaning that here we will have a south magnetic pole, right? Because of the reason why the south and the north of the needle is getting attracted towards each other. So this bar magnet that you see here is having an axis, right? This is the axis. Similarly, what is this axis? This is the geographic north pole and the south pole, right? This is 90-degree latitude north and 90-degree latitude south. Now this is the bar magnet having a particular axis. Understood this part? So this axis that you see here, in this direction, what do we have? In these two directions we will have poles. So these two poles that you see here are called as your geomagnetic poles. Understood what geomagnetic poles are? Fine. So the difference, see the axis of the magnetic pole that you see here, geomagnetic pole, or the axis of the bar magnet, it is not aligned with that of your geographic north pole, right? And the angle which exists between the geomagnetic dipole, that is your north and south pole, is currently tilted at an angle of about 11 degrees. So this angle between the geomagnetic north and south pole and the geomagnetic geographic north and south pole is called as your, or the angle is between 11 degrees. Understood this part? So this axis is having a angular variation of 11 degree. So these are not aligned together. Understood this point? So we understood the geographic pole, magnetic pole and geomagnetic pole, right? Fine. Okay, now look at this diagram. This diagram is very, very important. So this is the geographic North Pole, where all the latitudes are converging, where all the longitudes are converting at 90 degree, right? So these are the North Magnetic Pole, and then we'll have the North Geomagnetic Pole. Meaning what? Meaning that this is the North Magnetic Pole, where magnetic lines are 90 degree to the surface of the earth, and Geomagnetic Pole, and what is this point? This is the point where the axis of a bar lies. Understood this point? Fine. So we get three different types of pole: magnetic pole, geographic pole, and then geomagnetic pole. Okay, now what is magnetic declination? This is the next topic. What is magnetic declination? Magnetic declination is the angle between the magnetic north and the true north, and it is determined by this symbol. It's like a delta. Understood what is magnetic declination? The angle between the magnetic north, not geomagnetic north, but the magnetic north and true north. True north means your geographic north. Alright, so angle is called as your declination. A compass will always point towards your magnetic north, I have already explained, and not the geographic north. Fine. It is positive when the angle derived is east of the true north, and it is considered negative when the angle measured is west of the true north. Now see, now what is this? What is this? This is your geographic north, and this is your magnetic north. Understood? So here the declination is positive. Why? Angle derived is east of the true north. If the angle is to the east side of the true north, that is your geographic north, then the declination will be positive. Now suppose if your north magnetic pole was in this direction, north magnetic pole, the angle is towards the west, right? So in this case your declination will be negative. So we have two different types of declination. One is positive, one is negative. Positive when it is towards the east, and negative when it is towards your west. Fine. Then what is magnetic inclination? Now this magnetic inclination is talking about your angle which is made with the horizontal by the Earth's magnetic field lines. Meaning what? Again, go back to the magnetic poles. What are magnetic poles? Magnetic poles are those regions where the magnetic field line is 90 degree to the Earth's surface. Understood this point? Now look at this figure here. At this point what will we have? We will have 90 degree, or the angle which is made by the horizontal by the Earth's magnetic lines. Now this is a horizon, right? So here too we will have a horizon. Look at the equator region. At the equator region, this is the Earth, this is the Earth. Here we have the magnetic field lines is this direction, and then here we will have the surface of the Earth, right? Now what is the angle between these two? What is the angle between these two? Is it not 0 degree? If you look at the angle here between the horizon and the magnetic line, it is 90 degree. But at the equator region of the Earth, what is happening? At the equator, this is the horizontal to the Earth's surface, and this is the magnetic field lines, right? So the angle between these two is 0 degree. Meaning what? Meaning that the magnetic dip or magnetic inclination is 0 degree at the equator, and it will be 90 degree at the magnetic poles. Understood this? So what is magnetic inclination? Magnetic inclination is nothing but the angle which is made by the magnetic field line direction and the horizontal line to the surface of the Earth. Understood this point? So it is varying between 0 degree and 90 degree. 90 degree at the magnetic pole and 0 degree at the magnetic equator. Understood this? Fine. Next, geomagnetic reversals. Now what are geomagnetic reversals? Based on paleomagnetism. Now we have talked about paleomagnetism, right? Paleomagnetism refers to study of rocks, which shows what? It gives us evidences of geomagnetism, right? So based on paleomagnetism, it has been found that the Earth's magnetic field has reversed, causing the magnetic poles to also interchange. Meaning what? Meaning suppose the magnetic pole is in this direction today. Few years back or few millions of years back, what was happening? The south magnetic pole was here, and the south and the north magnetic pole was in this direction. Meaning what? Meaning the magnetic fields were reversing, or the magnetic poles were getting reversed, or the polarity was reversing. Fine. It has been observed that over the last 20 million years, the magnetic north and the south have flipped roughly 200,000 to 300,000 years, and reversal in polarity is not periodic like that of sun. In case of sun, the magnetic reversal or the polarity or the change of polarity of the magnetic field roughly happens after every 11 years. But in case of earth, the reversal of the polarity, it is not constant. It may vary, it may not vary. So there is no particular uniform period that it will change, unlike the sun where it is changing after every 11 years. Understood this point? Fine. Now we have two different types of polarity. One is called as your normal polarity and another one is called as your reverse polarity. What is the difference between them? In case of normal polarity, what is happening? Here it is the normal polarity is where the magnetic north point points towards the geographic north pole. Suppose this is your 90-degree latitude, here we have the geographic north, right? Similarly, if we have the magnetic north also in the same direction as the north geographic pole, and the south magnetic pole is also in the same direction as your south geographic pole, then it is called as your normal polarity. Understood this point? Fine. Similarly, in case of reverse polarity, it is totally opposite. In this case, what will happen? This is your geographic north pole. Here we will have the south magnetic pole. Understood this? Similarly, here we will have the north magnetic pole and the south geographic pole. Understood? So currently on the earth we are having a normal polarity. Understood the difference between normal polarity and reverse polarity? Now what is shift in the magnetic poles? Shift in the magnetic poles. The magnetic north pole reportedly drifts fast away from the Canadian Arctic and towards Siberia. Now this was in the news in the year of 2019. So this point states that the north magnetic pole, it is not constant in its location, but rather it is drifting, and it is drifting fast away from the Canadian Arctic towards Siberia. Siberia is a place which is in Russia. So from Canada, which is present here, suppose this is Canada, from Canada it has crossed the international dateline, which is at 100-degree latitude. It has crossed towards Russian region of Siberia. Understood this part? So when was it first discovered? In the year of 1831, it was discovered that the magnetic north pole was located somewhere north of Canada. But currently in 2019 as well as in 2020, from Canada it is moving towards the Siberia region, which is in Russia. Understood this part? Fine. It has been moving, but why this is important? Because it has been moving from about 14 to 1500 kilometer per year till the 1990s, and after 1990s what was happening? It was moving about 55 kilometer per year. So prior to 1990s it was moving at a speed of 14 to 15 kilometer per year, right? But after 1990s it was traveling at a speed of 5500 kilometer per year. Understood this point? Fine. Now let us talk about the another topic which is called as your magnetosphere. Now what is magnetosphere? Let me give you a brief introduction. So I have showed you a diagram, right, where the magnetic field lines are spiraling, right, or having a spiral movement. So these magnetic field lines that you see here, or this magnetic field of the earth that you see here, is extending up to how much length? It is extending up to 60,000 kilometer from the surface of the earth, right? So this area is called as your magnetosphere, or the area which is marked by presence of the earth's magnetic field is called as the magnetosphere. So introduction, what is it saying? The region around the planet dominated by the planet's magnetic field. In case of earth, it is your geomagnetism, right? The other planets in our solar system have magnetospheres, but the earth out of all the rocky planets will have the highest or the strongest magnetic field. Out of all the planets which is having the strongest magnetic field, it is the earth. Now why is it important, or why having a magnetic field is important? Because it shields or protects the earth from the charged particles of the solar wind and the cosmic rays that would otherwise strip away the atmosphere. So if this is the earth and these are the magnetic lines, from the sun solar wind is coming, right? From the sun what is coming? These solar winds. So these solar winds will carry what? Charged particles along with them, and these charged particles, if it travels towards the surface of the earth, it is being blocked by this magnetosphere or the magnetic field. And this is very, very important, because If magnetic field was not present, what would have happened? It would have stripped away the upper atmosphere. Understood this part? Fine. So this is the importance of a magnetic field. Now in areas you will see on earth, especially in the polar areas. In the polar areas, the magnetic field is somewhat relatively weak. Magnetic field is relatively weaker. Therefore, what do we see? In these areas, we will see that there is a lot of transmission issue, radio transmission issues. There is a lot of issues with radio transmission. Why is that happening? Because the charged particles are finding a way, or the solar winds are finding a way in penetrating the magnetosphere. Why so? Because in the polar areas, the magnetic field lines are relatively weaker. As such, in the polar areas, as these charged particles enter, it will cause problems with your radio transmission as well. Understood this part? Now this magnetosphere, now the diagram that I have been showing you with regards to the magnetosphere or the magnetic field lines is of this direction, right? But in reality, what happens? This is an ideal condition. In ideal condition, the magnetic field lines look like this. But in reality, what happens? The Earth's magnetic field, predominantly which is dipolar at its surface, it gets distorted further by the solar wind. So as the solar wind is coming in this direction, what is happening? This is the structure that we get. Look at this diagram with the red lines. So this is how in reality the magnetosphere looks like. Understood this? What is happening? The solar winds will exert a pressure. However, it is kept away by the pressure of the Earth's magnetic field. So in this area, the solar wind is delivering a pressure, right? Correspondingly, the magnetosphere is also delivering a pressure. Understood? And there is a balance in the pressure. So the magnetopause, the area where the pressure balance is, the boundary is called as your, okay. So what is magnetopause? Now I was talking about this pressure, right? So the solar winds which are coming is exerting a pressure. Similarly, the magnetosphere is also exerting a pressure, and the area here where the pressure is getting balanced, this area is called as your magnetopause. Understood what is a magnetopause? Magnetopause is the area where the pressure is getting balanced by the solar wind as well as from the magnetosphere. Understood? So this is the boundary. So what is magnetopause? Magnetopause can also be said to be the boundary of magnetosphere. Understood? Fine. Next we have the bow shock. Now what is a bow shock? Bow shock is the area or the sunward of the magnetopause is the bow shock. The area where the solar wind slows abruptly. Meaning what? This area that you see here is called as the bow shock. Understood? The solar side or the outward side of the magnetopause is called as the bow shock. And in this area, what is happening? In this area, the solar wind is slowing down. Now, why is it slowing down? It is slowing down because the magnetosphere is putting a pressure, right? As a result of this, the solar winds will encounter the magnetopause. As a result of this, what will happen? Its speed will slow down. Understood this point? Fine. Then what is a magnetosheath? Magnetosheath is the region, turbulent magnetic region just outside the magnetopause. Understood? So just outside the magnetopause, we'll have a region which is called as your magnetosheath, right? And then we'll have the plasma sphere. Inside the magnetosphere is the plasma sphere. It is a region containing low energy charged particles. Fine. And in this region, we have the presence of the ionosphere. So what is this? Okay, now there is another term. Now I hope you understood what a plasma sphere is, right? Then we also have an area which is called as the magnetotail. What is magnetotail? See, the magnetic field lines that you see here or the magnetosphere will have two areas. One, the frontal part, this area, and here we will have the backward part. So in the frontal part, we will have a spherical shape, right? Why? Because the pressure is coming from the solar winds as well as a pressure is exerted by the magnetosphere as well. As a result of this, we will get a spherical shape in the frontal part. But if you look into the back part, what is happening? A drag force occurs here. As a result of this, in the frontal part, we will have a spherical shape, and in the backward part, we will have a tail-like structure, and this tail-like structure is called as a magnetotail or magnetotail. Yeah, magnetotail. Fine. What is a magnetotail? Understood? Fine. Chalo. Okay. So this is the various regions that we have, that is in the magnetosphere. And finally we have the auroras. Now this is very, very important. What are auroras? Aurora is a display of light in the sky predominantly seen in your higher latitudes. So auroras are found where? In the higher latitudes, in the Arctic and the Antarctic region. Okay, these are also called as your polar lights. Now there are two types of auroras. One is called as the aurora borealis and another one is called as the aurora australis. Aurora borealis is found where? It is found in the North Pole region, and the aurora australis is found in the South Pole region. Fine. Now why do we have these auroras? This is very, very important. We have the auroras because of the collision takes place between your fast moving electrons from the space. Now where is this fast electrons coming from? It is coming from your solar winds, right, which are bringing charged particles with the oxygen and nitrogen in the upper atmosphere. So the charged particles which are being brought by the solar winds, it will come in collision with the oxygen and nitrogen, which will result in the formation of what? It will result in the formation of auroras. Now how it results in the formation of auroras? So once this collision is taking place, what will happen? This oxygen and nitrogen atoms will get excited, right? So from this excited state, when it goes to the normal state, that means the oxygen and nitrogen, it will release photons. Now what are photons? Photons are nothing but basic units of light, right? So when these photons combine together, with our naked eyes we can see a light, and this light is called as your auroras. Now why do we have auroras in the higher latitudes only? Because if you remember, what did I mention? I mentioned that in the higher latitudes the magnetic field lines is relatively weaker, and as a result of this, these charged particles brought by the solar winds are able to enter the Earth's atmosphere, right? So once these charged particles enters the Earth's atmosphere, it collides with the fast moving, it collides with the oxygen and nitrogen, right? So because of this collision, the oxygen and nitrogen will go to an excited state. From this excited state, when it comes to your normal state, it releases photon. So when these photons combine, we get light, and when we see this light through our naked eyes in the upper latitudes, in the polar areas, we call it as auroras. Understood this? Fine. Chalo. So this is about your magnetosphere. So in this class, what did we learn? So first thing that we learned is about your the reason behind your geomagnetism, right? Which is called as your dynamo theory, because in the outer core, what do we have? In the outer core, the material, or especially the iron, is having a convectional flow, right, which produces a electric current. This electric current will produce a magnetic field, and this magnetic field will in turn be produced in the adjacent layers and spreads across the Earth as well as towards the atmosphere up to a height of 60,000 kilometer, right? And that 60,000 kilometer from the surface of the Earth, where we have the Earth's magnetic field, it is called as what? It is called as your magnetosphere. Now we have three different concepts: geographic poles, the magnetic poles, and geomagnetic poles, right? Now what are magnetic poles? Magnetic poles are those areas where the magnetic field lines are perpendicular to the horizontal to the Earth's surface, right? Fine. So we have magnetic poles, and magnetic poles are different from that of your geographic poles, and they do not align together. Then we talked about the geomagnetic poles. What are geomagnetic poles? Now inside the Earth there is a hypothetical bar magnet having a north-south direction, and the axis of the bar is called as your, and the axis of the bar, when it meets the surface of the Earth, those points are called as your geomagnetic poles, and we'll have north geomagnetic pole and south geomagnetic pole. And this axis varies from your geographic axis, right? Geographic north and south pole, and the difference between them is your 11 degrees. Then we had talked about magnetic declination. What is magnetic declination? It is the angle between your magnetic north and the true north, right? So this is we have positive declination and negative declination. To the east we'll have positive, and to the west we'll have negative, right? Then we have magnetic inclination. Inclination is the angle which is made by the horizontal angle made between the magnetic field lines and the horizontal to the Earth's surface, and it is 90 degree at the poles and 0 degree at the equator region, right? Then we talked about reversals of the geomagnetic fields. Sometimes we get north and south, then we'll get south and north, right? Then we talked about normal polarity and reverse polarity. Currently we are suffering from, or currently we are having normal polarity, right? At one point of time we had reverse polarity. Fine. Then we talked about shift in the magnetic poles. So in 2019-20, where is it shifting? It is shifting towards your Canada, towards your Siberia region, right? Then we talked about the different regions of your magnetosphere. We talked about magnetopause, where the pressure gets balanced between your solar winds and the magnetic field, and this forms the boundary of your magnetosphere. Then we talked about the bow shock, which is your sunward side of the magnetopause. Then we talked about magnetosheath and plasma sphere, and finally we talked about the auroras. We have two types, aurora borealis and aurora australis. Then we also talked about the mechanism, right? How the collision between the charged particles and oxygen and nitrogen of the upper atmosphere results in formation of your auroras. Fine. Chalo. So this is where we'll end our topic today. So I hope you understood the topic of geomagnetism and the various dimensions associated with it. So in the next class, we'll progress into a new topic, and the name of the topic would be your rock system of the earth. So stay tuned to Scholars for more such educational content.